Hey, welcome to episode 8 of Bums in the Bleachers, brought to you by the Chicago Sports Bum. I'm Jeremy Sosa alongside Praz Master. Mike, tough week, tough weekend, all of it tough. I
Yes,
know we're gonna
very.
we're gonna obviously we're gonna try to talk some people off the ledge here. I think you and I both were feeling pretty grim over the weekend. But we're gonna try to work through this, right? We're gonna try to maybe have a little bit of a therapy session with each other and some of our fellow Cubs fans. So
Yeah, deep breaths here. Everyone count to 10 a few times. It's been a stressful one for sure, no matter where you look in Chicago sports these days. So
yeah,
yeah, it's been wild, but you know, sometimes this is how it all plays out when like I just said before we got started, sometimes if you don't take care of business in April and May, the games in September kind of catch up to you. So yeah. Hello,
yeah.
Senor. I'm sure you're a big fan of this show.
Well, listen. I mean, here's the thing. It's a good thing that we're feeling this way because it means that we are playing for something in September, which is what we
It's
really
true.
wanted at the beginning of the season. It's more than what any other sports team in Chicago could say at this point right now, right? The Sox have been out of it since pretty much May. Uh, you've
Hmm.
got you've got the Bulls that are pretty much going to be done before the season even starts, and obviously the Bears and Blackhawks are in a rebuild, so it's pretty grim right now. But you know what? Let's start off with a little bit of fun before we really kind of dig into a lot of the bad. We obviously do our overrated, underrated edition segments every single week. So this week, this was your idea, and I love this idea is um, Cubs celebrity fans. So specifically celebrities that are fans of the Chicago Cubs. We will rank overrated, underrated,
Yep.
favorite, least favorite. I had a tough time going through this because I actually have a couple for each one. I kind of cheated a little bit, so hope you don't mind.
I I think I got my four set here. I will say that you know this is probably a little bit poorly timed on my part. I didn't foresee that the Cubs would be out of a playoff spot when we'd be talking about this. I expected to preview this saying that like we'll be seeing a lot of these guys in October. Maybe not
Yep.
so much of a guarantee now, but I'll get us lead it up. I will lead us off if you want me to.
Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna make some people mad here, but my overrated is probably a guy who is many people's favorite. If you had to rank them all, I'm gonna go with Bill Murray. Bill Murray, like I do like him. He makes annual appearances at Wrigley often. We'll throw out the first pitch. We'll sing team after the ball game, but just feels like so often he's one of those guys that is living so much on the success of the past. Senior, to answer your question, that would be Ronnie Woo Woo. But yeah, Bill Murray, like he says anything and people just laugh, and it kind of feels like people are just pressured to laugh because of that. Obviously, he was a great actor in his day and great comedian, but doesn't really do it for me now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have Bill Murray later on in this list, but I have a tie for overrated.
Okay.
So my two overrated, it's a tie between Jim Belushi and John Cusack.
Ah,
So I'm going to go on Bill. So Jim Belushi first. Rode the coattails of his brother. Really hasn't done much other than again just being brother to John.
mhm.
I don't think he's necessarily funny. And yeah, I just think I mean he's an overrated Cubs fan in my opinion. And then John Cusack. The reason why I went with John Cusack is because I don't know if it was I think it was 2 years ago he got into a
Yep.
fight with Barstool Dave
Yep. White Sox Dave
because
from Barstool.
yeah, he called him out, and rightfully so, because John Cusack was showing up at White Sox games in White Sox gear during the playoffs. Where, listen, I like we talked about this a lot, right? I don't actively root against the White Sox. I don't
Yep.
wish that they fail. I don't wish that they suck every year. I'm
Correct.
indifferent because we see them 4 times a year at this point. To me, it's just a fan rivalry. It's not a real like sports rivalry. And like I said, most of my friends and family are Sox fans, so I personally don't care. But when you live in Chicago, pick your side. You know,
Exactly.
I'm not saying you need to actively root against, and even if like, hey, if the Sox are in it, you want to root for them because they're a Chicago team, that's fine. But to go buy Sox gear and wear it, that's another thing. So,
Right.
Cusack is overrated along with Jim Belushi for me.
I definitely love the John Cusack pick. Jim Belushi, I get why people have that sentiment. I feel like these days he gets a little bit of the Nickelback treatment. He doesn't really like. He's probably not. He definitely rides the coattails of his brother, but
Yeah.
at the same token, he doesn't do anything offensive like certain someone who I have listed as my least favorite.
Ooh,
Um,
I think we might have the least favorite, like the
yeah,
same. But give me
yeah, I think
your underrated.
underrated. Star of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. I'm going Bob Odenkirk.
Nice.
Guy that doesn't often get recognized as like a Chicago sports fan or Chicago area native, but he's been there. He's lifelong Cubs fan. Has been singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." Obviously, the star of two all-time great shows. So, yeah, Bob Odenkirk, love him. He's a guy who I think respects his spotlight. He doesn't try to go overboard with anything. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. So I had to tie between two. Bob Odenkirk was one of them. So I won't take a deep dive into that since you've already covered that. But agree, 100% with you. Bob Odenkirk, big Cubs fan, completely underrated to me. But I also went with Nick Offerman. So
good one.
Ron Swanson
Love Ron
from the Office.
Swanson.
So I mean, who doesn't love, like, the stash,
Wait,
the burliness, madness.
Parks and Recreation, not The
Oh
Office.
yeah, I'm sorry. Oh my God, wow, I really messed that one up. But
It's
yes,
all good.
Parks and Recs, because yeah, I love the Ron Swanson character. I mean, Ron Swanson is like a whole spirit animal in itself.
He is.
But yes, so Nick Offerman, great Cubs fan, and honestly from South. I mean, South of Chicago. I think he's a Manuka boy, if I'm not mistaken. So
That sounds right.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah, he's a little bit further south, but big Cubs fan, so appreciate him.
for sure.
Yeah.
Favorite for me. He is on my all-time favorite show as Fat Tony on The Simpsons. He plays a character on Criminal Minds that has a similar name to the current manager of the Chicago Cubs. Going Joe Montana. Also, kind of
Nice.
gave us a little bit of the namesake for our podcast here. Bleacher Bums Broadway show, and we're
Yep.
bums in the bleachers. So shout out Joe Montana. You're my favorite celebrity Cubs fan.
Yeah, that's a good one. So my favorite, I had a tie as well. You named it as your overrated. So Bill Murray is one of my favorites, and I think it's honestly, it might have just been like a different generational thing. I mean, I
Could
grew up
be.
on, Ghostbusters, and that was a phenomenon for us as kids, back in the 80s. So I'm gonna go with Bill, aging myself a little bit here, but Bill Murray, I love, and I've always thought was funny, and I think just the amount of passion and love that he has for the Cubs and has never wavered. I
That's a
think
good
it's
point.
it's awesome. So, and then my other one tie there was Vince Vaughn. So uh,
Good call on Vince Vaughn.
he's another one,
Haven't
man.
seen
Just
him around as much.
yeah, he hasn't been to some Cubs games recently, but I think he's been pretty true and true. He was the voice commentator of the Cubs World Series documentary when it was made,
Yep.
and just awesome. So love Vince Vaughn. He's one of my favorites. All right,
Gotcha.
let's see if we
All
have
right.
the same least favorite here.
I believe we do. Star of Curb Your Enthusiasm and big fan of Pat Hughes, Jeff Garlin. Yeah, he was there in the booth a couple of weeks ago against the Giants, the game they swept
Uh huh.
them. The last time any of us were happy. It's like Jeff Garlin just took away all our happiness by being right there in the booth. Honestly, we can blame him for this entire stretch, really.
Yep.
But yeah, he just anytime he's there, he's just taking over the broadcast. It feels like,
Yeah.
and stealing the microphone from a Hall of Famer and Pat Hughes when he's trying to do his job, talking over him constantly. For what it's worth, he's also somewhat a competitor of ours as well because he hosts his own podcast, By the Way in Conversation. I probably shouldn't have given him that plug there, but a big GFY to Jeff Garland, my least favorite celebrity Cubs fan.
So I'm going to show you. We actually picked the same thing because I had this pre-written down. So I also have Jeff Garlin. Surprise, surprise. Um, Least favorite, and honestly, I Curb Your Enthusiasm. He is hilarious on that show. I mean,
For sure.
he is perfect for that show. He's perfect for that role. He's so funny. Alongside Larry David. In their kind of friendship dynamic in that show. So I love him in Curb. Not a lot else beyond that. And I agree. I think like when he's in those broadcast booths, like he tends to kind of play into that whole like obnoxious Jeff Garlin character, which
Hmm.
it feels like it's a character. So yeah, not a fan.
Something I've heard about him too is that he apparently does not drink at all. He acts like he's drunk
Oh,
every time he's in the
yeah,
Cubs booth, though.
that's
Um,
surprising.
and I feel like you and I, the pick we made for our least favorite celebrity Cubs fan would. I think that if you polled most Cubs fans, the consensus pick for like least favorite would probably be Jim Belushi. Maybe if you think about it after a few minutes and think about all the times you watched the game that Jeff Garlin invaded, it would probably be Jeff Garlin.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so we obviously wanted to talk a little bit about the Cubs. Even though our episode is titled "We Don't Want to Talk About It," we actually do want to talk about it. Even though I kind of don't want to talk about it, but I'm going to start off here. I am going to blown just kind of like jump in here and give some partial blame to the Chicago Bears because
Yes.
they have started off the season so shittily, and I just made a word right there. They
No,
are
it's good. Keep going with
they
it. I
are
like it.
they are spreading their bad juju to the Cubs. I wrote this down here. Since the Bears season has started, which was only just a Sunday ago, the Cubs have gone 2-6 since the start of the Bears season. And honestly, it's just we knew that this is what happens, right? When football starts, it takes the complete attention of every sports fan
Yes.
because NFL owns one day of the week for 17 weeks straight, not including playoffs. So we know that, right? We knew that they were going to take the attention of baseball and Cubs fans, and rightfully so. I mean, it's a team that we could all actively root for together, and
Hmm.
they have given us no reason to do so. And it's not fair to the Cubs, right? And it's like, because it's taken their attention. It's not fair to the city of Chicago because we honestly
Right.
deserve better at this point. We deserve playoff teams, right?
Yep.
Whether it's the White Sox, whether it's the Cubs, whether it's the Bulls, Blackhawks, even the Chicago Fire. Like we deserve playoff teams. We are a major market city, and
Yeah.
I cannot believe that the last two Sundays I have tuned into that just shit team that has just looked absolutely no better than last year. They look actually worse, and I've wasted two Sundays, which I could have been spending more time watching the Cubs. Which I mean, even maybe I shouldn't have spent more time watching the Cubs,
True.
but I'm blaming them. I'm blaming
Hey,
the Bears. It's the
they won
Bears.
they won on the same day as week one of the Bears. Like we definitely would have rather
Okay.
been watching the Cubs against the Diamondbacks win than the Bears lose and get their brains beaten by the Packers. So
Yeah.
yeah, we're
One of
good
the
there.
one wins they had out of the last 2 weeks. So
Yeah.
yeah, ouch.
Exactly.
But yeah.
Thanks a
So
lot, Bears.
yeah, I mean, you mentioned Arizona, and this obviously is the latest series. We just shot Thursday, so I mean, we're coming off a short week here, you and I, because we obviously got to talk through a lot of different series and stuff. But
Yep.
September has been really brutal for the Cubs. They
Oh
have
my
gone 7-10 this month. They have split one series with the Reds. They have swept the Giants, and then they have lost three straight series after, ending in a sweep with Arizona.
Yeah. It's man, we were flying so high after that Giants sweep, man. Like it's crazy to think we're less than 2 weeks removed from the Cubs being just a game and a half back of the Brewers for the NL Central lead. And now here we sit 10, 11 days later wondering if this is even going to be a team that makes the playoffs at this point. I mean, we felt so freaking secure. Um, I don't know how to describe it because like, you know, it's a little bit of new uncharted territory for me because like every other Cubs collapse you could think of featured like a core of players that like had all been there together and had all like had varying degrees of successes together. this is an entirely new bunch that like jumped into like one competitive year together that like has no a lot of these guys, if you think about Bellinger and Swanson, who come from the Dodgers and the Braves, successful organizations that like never have that haven't really missed the playoffs that much since they've been major leaguers. Like this is this has got to be real new to them. Thank you for the support, bums. Thank you.
Yeah, so I agree. I mean, it's obviously this is feels like it feels different, right? We knew like when they won the World Series, we started to kind of see the demise of the team, over the last
Hmm.
few years where the offense had been really stagnant. Theo had used the term famously that the offense is broken.
Yeah.
They never found a way to recoup, and they ended up trading everybody from their roster. The only remaining player from that 2016 team is Kyle Hendricks,
Yep.
and this feels different. And my thing is, and we talked about it pre-show, and we've talked about it, through the week. Is this team feels like they're losing steam. It honestly feels
Does.
like they are just tired, and it makes sense why they would be. I mean, they literally, you have to think about this, right? Let's put this into context. Before June, or even just leading into June, and leading into that Cardinal series where they basically became buyers, they were 10 games under 500 at one point. So to be almost 10 games over, that's a 20 game swing. You're having to play your starters every single game. You're
Yep.
having to throw your rotation out there every single game, and not rely on your bullpen as much as you can. And um, honestly, and they've had to honestly use their bullpen like and it rightfully so. They're playing for their playoff lives, so every game feels like a playoff game at this point. And at some point, there is a mental drain, there's a physical drain, and I feel like it's starting to show.
Yeah. I mean, again, over this entire stretch that they have been playing with their hair on fire for seemingly since the All Star break, you know, like the times that it seemed like the wins were going to come easy, they just haven't come easy. The you know it feels like every win and possibly every loss that you're having to turn to guys that uh you can't let a guy get any rest. You can't not turn to your high leverage relievers. And, we're seeing it now that some of the high leverage relievers have been burnt out. Edward Alzolay is now on the injured list. You have Michael Fulmer now on the injured list. The only guy you really have any trust in at this point is Julian Merriweather. Um, yeah, it's been like it has been so like exhausting on these guys, and I in a way it does also kind of reflect on them too that they haven't been able to take advantage of those situations. I mean, we'll get into it in a little bit, but like this should have been a very favorable road trip for them, one in which the Cubs fans should have been dominating the home crowds every game, and against the Rockies, one of the worst teams in baseball, you're the favorite every freaking game of that series, and you only come up with 1 out of 3 there. In Arizona, again, so many freaking Chicago transplants live out there that
Yeah, right.
dedicate dedicate their whole year to going to these games after spring training is over. You get the insane luck that you don't have to face Merrill Kelly or Zach Gallen for this 3 game series.
Yep.
And, you know, outside of game 2, which featured a lot of extra innings that started with runners on second base, the offense just looked completely dead. It's maddening. It truly is freaking maddening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think the thing that was really concerning too, I mean, we obviously got to see them on the road for the last 6 games, not even being able to hit in Colorado, and I think we talked about it a little bit on our last cast. Was just the ball travels so well there. There's lots of gaps, a lot of like funky like divots in that outfield that, I mean, anybody who has double power should have huge games there, and we just didn't see it. And I think that's kind of like where I'm starting to see, like, Ian Happ he's really been trying to push through, and he's
He
had a
has.
tough go of it this year. He hasn't had the year that he expected, in a year that he just signed an extension. I feel like he's pressing at this point,
He's got to
and
be.
even like guys like Dansby Swanson who notoriously try to play every single game of the year. I mean, Dansby Swanson played what I think 161 last year, if not 162.
Well,
Um,
there was an entire thing about how, like, when he was with the Braves, like the last 4 years, and I mean, this obviously includes the 60-game COVID season, but you
mhm.
could maybe count on one hand the amount of times that he took a day off that entire
Yeah,
time. Every year you look at his stats, it was one in the 150s or 160s for games played for Dansby Swanson. Um, I mean,
right.
yeah,
And minus one, stint that he had where he was hurt for a few games. I mean, he's done it again, and I think that's where we're starting to see like, I mean, even in his defense, I mean, he's made a couple, errors over the last couple weeks that you don't expect Dansby Swanson to make, right?
especially
Um,
Saturday night, freaking right
yeah,
before the Diamondbacks won it. Like, and that was a tough play to make for him. Probably a tougher play to make than most people would be able to appreciate because he probably didn't expect that ball to bounce off Wisniewski how it did. But at
yeah,
the same time, you got to make a better effort than you made for that one when the game is on the line like that.
yeah. I mean, and there was a couple plays where I felt like he booted the ball. That again, these are plays that whether they're easy or not, somebody like Dansby Swanson usually covers those, and
Right.
it was just a little bit shocking to me to see. So I mean, the offense hasn't been there for him. The defense looks like it's starting to get a little tiresome. Which, like I said, it's. I think we're starting to see that this finally has taken a toll on this team where they have had to fight back from 10 under, and every game has counted for them pretty much since June. Um, so when you look at how long a season is, and you look at like, especially like you hear this term all the time, the dog days of summer, right? Like they're right in the middle of summer, August, into September. This has been going on 2 months prior. So, I mean, it's been a long stint. And there was they obviously had at one point, August leading into September here, or I can't remember if it was September that it was, but they played 14 games in 13 days. Um,
Yep.
they had
Because
like a day
doubleheader
off.
in Cincy. Yeah.
Yeah, they had a day off. It really didn't give them a chance to fully reset. It felt like, because they played so poorly against some of these other playoff teams. But you said it. Like they had this kind of road field advantage in a lot of ways. Where, especially in Arizona, where I think JD even said it on the cast that they called it. If Miller Park or I don't know what is an American Family Field or
It'll
whatever it's
always
called
be
now.
Miller Park. Who
Yeah,
cares? It's Wrigley
but
North to us.
yeah,
Yeah.
if Miller Park is Wrigley North, that Chase Field is Wrigley West, right? So
Yeah. Or Southwest or however you want to put it. But yeah,
right.
definitely. I mean, yeah,
So
it would make so much sense with like all the Chicago people that are there that, yeah. I mean, like I said, they had every advantage over the entire course of that road trip,
yeah,
and not just with avoiding Merrill Kelly and not just with avoiding Zach Gallen,
Zach Gallen,
but,
yep,
but you had Justin Steele and Jordan Wicks
Hendricks
who,
and
and,
Hendricks.
and Kyle Hendricks who pitched pretty well among the three, actually had the best pitching performance of the three. But particularly in the Steele and the Wick starts, like those were the games that you felt really good going into, and then
Yep,
after one inning, you're down 3-0 after those guys give up early runs.
yeah.
It's
So
just, yeah.
so after that series, they have now finished. I wrote this down from April to August on the road in the West Coast. The Cubs were 9-6. So this was against teams like the Dodgers. They obviously got swept by the Angels earlier this year, where they were in that funk.
I forgot
Again,
about that one.
take this with a grain of salt. They swept Oakland, which they should sweep Oakland. But looking back now, it looks like maybe man, if they were playing Oakland this time of year, maybe it's a little bit different. And San Francisco too. They obviously played San Francisco pretty well. So
Yep.
9-6 from April to August. In September, they are 1-5 on the West Coast. So thankfully, we don't have to go back the rest of this year unless they make the playoffs and potentially face somebody from the West Coast. But
Right.
I might not
And
going to complain
please
about
don't let
that.
it be the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, Jesus.
Please. I don't want to see any more of those guys because that is
Yeah,
we really took those guys for granted. They are a damn good baseball team, I gotta
they are.
say.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Gurriel is slowly becoming like a Cubs killer in a lot of fashion. So
Yeah. Thanks a
um,
lot, Blue Jays, for just giving him up to the Diamondbacks for nothing.
I know.
Anyways.
And now we're in tiebreaker hell. We have effectively lost series against just about every team that's in the mix to make the playoffs right now, or fighting for that final wild card spot. So we don't have the tiebreaker against Arizona. Obviously after losing 3 out of 4 at Wrigley and then being swept in Arizona, they don't have the tiebreaker against Miami. They lost the tiebreaker to Cincinnati after splitting with them earlier this month. And the only team that we do have the tiebreaker over is San Francisco. So, yeah, tough times. They're going to have to win this outright.
And you figure that San Francisco is probably the team that like will factor in the least because they're the furthest back of any of the teams you would still consider to be in the wild card mix. So yeah, like these next two series against the who do they got? They got the Pirates and the Rockies. Like they are crucial. Like you got to treat these games like you're playing the Braves or the Brewers or the Dodgers because like you can't just assume that you're going to get an easy win because you haven't gotten the easy wins against teams that you should have beat, including the Rockies, last year. And granted, Coors is a tricky place to handle sometimes, but again, it's the worst team in the National League. I will say, every time that Chris Bryant comes up to bat in that series, just don't even let him get to home plate. Just have him go straight to first base from the on-deck circle because, like, I think he's on a mission to, like, show us that, I mean, not with his overall stats, but with his head-to-head stats against the Cubs, with what he did in Coors, he's a little bit on a mission to show that he's not happy with us.
Yep. So quick update for scores. Cincinnati, we know, won earlier today, so they are now tied with the Cubs for the last wild card spot right now in the National League. Miami just lost to the New York Mets, so they are now
thank you Mets.
Yeah, half a game out of the final spot. So right now it is very, very tight in the National League wild card standings. We have Philadelphia that is currently beating up on the Braves right now. If they pull this one out, they'll have a 4-game lead there. They will have a 1-game lead on Arizona. Or I'm sorry, no, they'll have they're 3.5-game lead on Arizona. But a 4-game lead overall from everybody else in the standings for the wild card. So Philly looks like they're about to win. And then Arizona's obviously off today, and the Cubs are off today. So
Cubs and Diamondbacks are off. Just one other note I want to get to before we move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Had the Cubs simply just gone 500 during this whole 10-game stretch since the end of that Diamondbacks, or since the start of that Diamondback series at Wrigley, not only would they still be comfortably in the second wild card spot right now, but I did the math. Even if it was only 1 game against the Diamondbacks that they wound up winning that they would have lost, they would be a half game behind the Phillies coming into play tonight. Now, obviously, that changed because the Phillies wound up winning, so they'd be a full game with a tiebreaker still, but you'd love to have that position than where you're at now. Like, all you had to do was go 500 baseball against some pretty easy matchups, I would have thought.
Right. All right. Well, we obviously got to move on. We're on a little bit of a shorter crunch time today because we have the main bums on right after us. So
tune in then with Chirizi tonight.
Yeah, that'll be a fun show. All right. So let's jump into our start and DFA for today. So I sent these over to you earlier. Like I said, I didn't really give you a lot of context on the first one. And this was kind of intentional. So I'm going to just read off the stats here. We're going to go with player 1 here, batting .279 with an on base of .358, .501 slug, and OPS of .858, 24 home runs, 70 RBIs, 104 runs scored, 26 2-baggers, 47 stolen bases, 132 OPS plus, and a baseball reference WAR of 4.9.
Okay.
So that's player 1. Player 2, slash line of .275, .369, .588, 26 home runs, 99 RBIs, 87 runs, 31 doubles, 13 stolen bases.
Supposed to be stolen bases, yeah.
Yeah, 135 OPS plus, and it cut it off here, but a baseball reference of 5.3. Okay, so player 1 has played 145 games, and player 2 has played 151 games.
145 versus 151. And this is okay. So they played 151. That means they played pretty much every game so far this year because the Cubs have played 150. I mean, it's not that big of a difference. I do kind of like player one stats better. I got to say, because, doubles are right on par, but, when he gets on with a single, he's much more of a threat to steal.
Yep.
A little more in the analytics production with player two, but, hitting stats are right on par, but you're getting the speed threat with player one, so I'll go player one.
Okay.
I'll player one start, player two DFA.
So you have DFA'd player 2, which was Chris Bryant's Rookie of the Year season.
Oh my God.
And you have chosen to start a guy that we just finished seeing and hopefully don't see again in Corbin Carroll from the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Okay.
This year in his rookie year. So potential Rookie of the Year winner against a past Rookie of the Year winner. These are both, again, they were their rookie years. So this will be essentially Rookie of the Year versus Rookie of the Year seasons.
Wow. That's a hell of a okay. So the 151 games, I was thinking this was this year, but okay, yeah, because he didn't get called up until maybe 2 weeks after the season started. Right. So okay, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Sorry, KB, love you, but you know what? Corbin Carroll is going to be running away with the Rookie of the Year this year, and projects to have a pretty damn good major league career. So
he is he's a damn good player. Damn good player.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So, all right. So 2 guys we just finished seeing in the last week or so. Now I'm going to jump into some retired players here. So I'm going to go with some pitchers here. So player 1, and again, this is 2 retired pitchers over a course of 162 game average. So their careers, if it was 162 game average, player 1 went 11-13 record with a 4.14 ERA. They averaged 203 innings pitched per season, 127 strikeouts and 77 walks, 91 ERA plus, 4.31 FIP, and a whip of 1.317. Player 2 averaged a record of 14-11 with an ERA of 4.08, 216 innings pitched, 134 strikeouts, 87 walks, ERA plus of 97, a FIP of 3.93, and then a whip of 1.387.
Okay. When you texted me this earlier, by the way, I think I recognize who player 2 is, because I want to say I've been on his baseball reference page a couple times and recognized that career ERA, but both guys workhorses for sure, or averaging over 200 innings per season over the course of their career. Probably played in an era that, was a little before the steroid era, if there's not as many strikeouts, not as many players swinging, but not allowing many walks. Whips are a little higher on both ends than you'd like them to be, but I think I got a good idea of who player 2 is, and I think he's not in the Hall of Fame, but I think he should be a Hall of Famer. I think I'm going to go with player 2, and I'm going to just take a wild guess. Start player 2, DFA player 1. Is player 2 Rick Sutcliffe?
Player 2 is Rick Sutcliffe. So,
all right.
You have started Rick Sutcliffe as the player 1. I'm sorry, player 2. Player 1 is retired pitcher, Cubs broadcaster Jim DeShays.
Oh, wow. Wow, those are really close to each other. I never would have guessed Jim DeShays would have been like right on par with Rick Sutcliffe, but
right.
And here I am talking about Rick Sutcliffe possibly being a Hall of Famer. I don't think anyone would ever make that argument for Jim DeShays, but okay, good call.
Well, so the one thing I will say, there's a caveat here. Jim DeShays did this over a 12-year career. Rick Sutcliffe did this over 18 years. So I'm sure there's a couple bad years in there that obviously either deflated some of his stats and brought them down. But in his prime, Suddy the Red Baron was he was a beast on the mound. So
he was for sure.
I think you picked right.
Did you happen to notice too when you were looking at JD's career baseball reference page that his career record is 84 and 95, and he
Mm-hmm.
pitched from 1984 to 1995.
Yep.
That's one note that my buddy Matt brought up to me that I like. It caught me by surprise the first time I heard it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So not a bad career average for for JD. So he
No,
had some
not at all.
pretty good
Especially in the
averages.
steroid era for him. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. All right. So let's jump into our flying the W's, taking the L's. We got about 10 minutes here before we sign off and hand off to the main bums for their show. So
Okay.
let's do our flying the W's, taking the L's. I know you have a few. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go through mine? I only have one W and one L.
If you can knock him out quick, go ahead.
Awesome. Cool. So my W, for those of you that follow me on Instagram, my handle is the Dram Daddy. Pretty big into whiskey here. I went to Kentucky Bourbon Fest in Bardstown, Kentucky, which was just an absolute blast. I mean, you're probably noticing right now, this is the only thing I'm drinking tonight. It was a long weekend. It was a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday festival. Drove in. My buddy picked me up. My good buddy picked me up Friday morning at 5:30 a.m. in the morning. We drove straight to Kentucky, checked into our hotel, dropped off our bag, went to 20 minutes to the fest, immediately started submerging ourselves into some whiskey, drank for about 5 hours straight.
You were in heaven, I bet.
Yes, but also a lot of liquid IVs, a lot of water, some snacks. But I had a great time. I mean, it was such a great experience. You got to see a lot of people that I've met online. Great friends that I've met on social media, and obviously have never met in person because everyone's around the country. So this is such a cool event for everybody to kind of come in, just kind of celebrate, whiskey, try different, craft distilleries, especially, and kind of highlight some of those small dogs in the industry. It was so much fun. I got to smoke some cigars in peace because I have a 3.5, almost 4-year-old daughter that I try not to smoke around. So that was kind of nice that I could in peace. So yeah, just amazing event. Shout out to the Kentucky Bourbon Fest. They did such a phenomenal job of putting everything together. It felt really safe, very inclusive. Just a great environment. It was so much fun. I met so many people and got to do so much. So that's my W, is Kentucky Bourbon Fest. So on the opposite side of that, my L, very quickly, my L goes to my liver and my bank account, because both took a severe, very, very severe hit this weekend. I will be detoxing over the next few days, and also not spending any money. So it's gonna be a lot of rice and ramen for me over these next few weeks. So
yeah,
that's my L. So I'll go ahead and let you take over.
Good luck. Hope I'm not too loud and exacerbating any hangover with
You're good.
What you're hearing from me. All right. W's for me. I got 3 W's. One bright spot in Chicago sports right now is a couple prospects right now. Namely, one Connor Bedard of the Blackhawks. First preseason NHL game, scores a hat trick. Cannot wait to see him play at the United Center this year. And I know you're going to be there for his first professional game in Pittsburgh, right?
Yep. And then his first home game in Chicago as well.
Oh, I'm so jealous. Damn.
Yep.
All right. Other W's. Another prospect. Cubs first round pick Matt Shaw. He's already at AA Tennessee after being drafted in June. He's slashing 357, 400, 618, a 1018 OPS, 8 homers, 28 RBIs, 27 runs scored, 15 stolen bases, and just a 14.7% K rate. Shout out Matt Shaw, man. He has burst on the scene like no other Cubs prospect I've ever seen. And then somewhat lowercase L, because it didn't really, it didn't result in any Cubs wins. But welcome back, Marcus Stroman. 3 innings of relief, no earned runs allowed, and 2 relief appearances in Arizona. Good to see him back. Hopefully, can be that fixture as a multi-inning reliever. Hopefully they stretch him out to get back in the rotation. He looked damn good.
He did.
L's. The first game against the Diamondbacks at Wrigley, you may have noticed that out in the left field bleachers, there was a couple that was getting married in the middle of the game. Since then, the Cubs are now 2-8 since they got married in the bleachers in the middle of a must-win playoff chase
Oh
game for the Cubs.
man, that's
I
harsh.
saw someone suggest on Twitter that in order to reverse this tomorrow night against Pittsburgh, there needs to be a couple that gets divorced in the bleachers. So can we get that in works? Are there any unhappy couples watching us? If so, get the deal done at Wrigley tomorrow. So L to that couple that got married in the bleachers. And then my other L is going to be the city of Chicago / Chicago Department of Transportation for how they handled Friday and Saturday night on Mexican Independence Weekend. I was out driving Uber, and I gotta say, it was disheartening the fact that like I could not get any sort of access into downtown to pick up any passengers that I needed to because everywhere I went, the streets were all blocked off. And this is by no means me saying like that you know the Mexican people that were out celebrating shouldn't be celebrating. By all means, I'm a free thinking man. I think you should be out there doing that. I just think the people controlling the streets, if they see the Uber or the Lyft tag on your car, you should be allowed to just pass right through and get a little bit of a special exception if you're trying to get someone home. So yeah, those are my W's and L's.
All right, that's fair enough. Okay, so finishing up here, we have 6 games coming up right here at home at Wrigley Field against 2 of the worst teams in the National League, which we talked about hasn't really meant much over the last few weeks, but 3 against Pittsburgh, 3 against Colorado. You mentioned pregame that they are completely skipping Tyon in the rotation and going
Yes.
straight with Assad to start off. So give me your predictions for this week, Mike. What do you think? We got 6 games here. What do you think they'll do?
All right. We have not heard any sort of pitchers announced yet for the Pirates, and obviously not yet for the Rockies because not even the Cubs have announced those starters yet. But
Yeah.
I will say that they go 4-2, but it's going to be a Pirates sweep and then another 1 out of 3 performance against the Rockies, just
Wow.
because
Okay.
they've had no problem this year with the Pirates,
Mhm.
especially earlier this year when the Cubs weren't exactly as good as we thought they would become. They still found a way to beat the Pirates every time out. But yeah, the Rockies, there's just something about seeing them ever since that 2018 wild card game that gives me the nervous shakes a little bit there. So I'm going 4-2.
Okay. So I'm actually going to go 5-1. So I kind of
Nice.
see the opposite here. I think they're going to take 2 out of 3 from Pittsburgh. They haven't, like you said, they haven't had a lot of trouble with Pittsburgh this year, but I do think that there's always baseball, that happens. And
That's
the
true.
Cubs have not been a team that has swept many teams this year. So I'm going to say that they go 2-1 against Pittsburgh. And they are going to sweep Colorado in a revenge series. Colorado has been
That would be so
really
nice.
Colorado. So let me just point this quick stat out for Colorado. Colorado is 34-40 at home. So they're not terrible at home. They're not by any means world beaters at Coors Field, but they're only 6 games under 500. They are 22-53 on the road. So
Oof.
those road splits really
Okay.
make a difference for those teams. So I'm going to say that they're going to get some revenge here and sweep Chris Bryant in his homecoming. So I'm hoping for 5-1. I think they correct the ship and let's go.
I hope so too. Way to do the homework on that. I didn't even consider the Road Rockies, but yeah. As we wrap up here, I just have one message for the Cubs. Please, this week, you can see my shirt right here. Try not to suck this week. Please, Cubs, try not to suck.
All right, we've got a couple more weeks here. I'm not going to walk off the cliff yet because I think there's some time here. Like I said, if they go 5-1 this week, I think things will start to correct themselves again. So let's go and let's finish strong. So before we wrap up, we wanted to give a quick announcement about next Monday's show. So we
Yes.
will hopefully have a better idea of how the playoff standings will look. They're obviously getting really tight here. But we are very, very excited to announce that we are going to have our friends over from the Barrels and Barrels podcast to come on our show next Monday, 7:30 Central Time. Our friends over from Barrels and Barrels, they are a bourbon and baseball podcast. I actually gave them samples of the Bourbon Bums bourbon and rye picks from Knob Creek.
Very nice.
I just saw Brandon Spinner, who is also a fun fact, a meteorologist in Cincinnati. So he's actually
Oh wow.
He's on Cincinnati's newscast, does their weather. Um, yeah, so he's a big whiskey guy. I actually met him through Instagram, social media. Saw him at Kentucky Bourbon Fest. So I talked to him and his partner, Michael, who are going to jump on our cast. So we're going to have two mics on the show and talk some Cubs baseball, potential like what could happen the final week, what playoff series might look like, what matchups might look like, and then also maybe some playoff predictions. So it'll be a fun show.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All right, Mike. Well, like you said, let's go Cubs. Try not to suck.
Try not to suck, please.
Predicting 5-1. So it starts tomorrow. Let's go Cubbies.
Let's go.
All right, y'all. Have a great rest of your night.